We all know of the story of the Good Samaritan. That the Good Samaritan saved a man who was facing instant, imminent death, almost irreversible. And in doing so, that's how good Samaritan was. Now, this story helps us to answer to some of the arguments that are proposed by those who would rather believe that God can intentionally, deliberately take life, which I call the fatally injured animal argument. Now, a dear brother of mine has this interesting argument against the doctrine that says God does not intentionally take life. His argument tries to prove that mercy and love can be achieved by intentionally taking away a life. And it goes like this. If you're driving down the road and you come across a fatally injured animal, it is an act of love and mercy if you look for a gun and shoot it to relieve it of its misery of dying slowly, right? Well, not so. God's love and mercy provide what is needed by the recipient. Any dying animal, or for that matter, any dying human, if given a choice to full restoration, would choose full restoration to life, not a bullet in the head to finish it off. Even the most sick and dying person, if some danger comes about, they could even get a little bit of strength to try to run away from that danger, even though they're still under the death grip of a different kind of misery that they've been facing before that. So killing an animal, a terminally injured animal, is not love. It is not an act of love. Although your heart may feel that you're exercising love, but it is not an act of love. It is a testimony to your utter powerlessness to save. If you had the power to remove the misery, if you had the power to remove that cause of death, that cause of imminent death being faced by the animal or by a human being for that matter, you would never kill anything to save it from misery. God's power is not limited, and to assume that God will kill because he cannot provide the salvation that is needed is actually to restrict the power of God as one who is unable to save and restore even to the uttermost. If finishing off a fatally injured deer or a fatally injured animal was an act of mercy and love, then the Good Samaritan got it wrong. Of course, he was not faced with an animal, but a human being. But the principle that if something is fatally injured, if something is about to die and is struggling in that misery and suffering, to kill it off is a better option, which shows love, then the Good Samaritan did not take the best option, because he took the best option that is according to God. That's why we call him good. And his best option was to give a man who could not even stand or walk, maybe not even could talk, but he took him in and did what was necessary to restore him, even though he did not know whether those efforts to restore the man were going to be fruitful, whether the man was going to survive or not, yet he still did it. And that would be a godly thing to do. And Christ would not have come to this world to save a miserable, dying people as we are. I'm sure he can find some more instant way to wipe out the earth and all that is in them, right? Without bothering to try to save them. If the act of love is to finish off a dying people, then Christ would have done it. But he didn't. Even the most miserable, the most irredeemable, if there is any such person in this world, Christ still offers his restoration to that person. So in that fatally injured animal example or argument, God would try to save it no matter how close to death it was, because he can save to the uttermost. Only the animal's lack of cooperation could result in its death. And this is what human beings are. When death comes upon them because they've lacked cooperation with what God has offered for their restoration, they blame God for killing them. And this is a tragedy. It is a tragedy that in Christianity and among Bible believers and Bible preachers, they've preached this message that God would deliberately take life because that life has been rebellious to Him. Lastly, the good thing, though, in that fatally injured animal analogy is that it recognizes that God is not the one who causes the fatal injury to start with. That is to say, the misery and the suffering and all that causes death does not originate from God. So God also literally, so to speak, if we can put it that way, stumbled upon a miserable people and tried to save them. That we are in misery is not his intentional act. So it follows that the ultimate death that comes from being in that misery, which is the cause of the death, which is the prelude to the death that comes upon us, could also not have come from him. It cannot be God's intentional act either. That's exactly what the God does not kill doctrine says. E.G.W. writes it in this way. In the book The Great Controversy, page 36, a book which many people have read and many people do promote, but there's a statement there which they probably have not looked at very carefully and understood its import and its implications. She says, God does not stand toward the sinner as an executioner of the sentence against transgression, but he leaves the rejectors of his mercy to themselves to reap that which they have sown. Every ray of light rejected, every warning despised or unheeded, every passion indulged, every transgression of the law of God is a seed sown which yields its unfailing harvest. The Spirit of God, persistently resisted, is at last withdrawn from the sinner, and then there is left no power to control the evil passions of the soul, and no protection from the malice and enmity of Satan. So the seed is sown by men, and the seed gives its harvest, and that harvest is death, not because God has killed, but this is a natural consequence of a path that man has chosen. And when man is in that state of death, he looks around to God, points a finger at him, and says, "You are the one who is the source of death." What a tragedy that Christianity has preached such a doctrine. If you want more studies like this about the character of God and about the identity of God, you can find them on those links that are on your screen. I'll put the same in the discussion so you can also refer to them. May God richly bless you as you ponder over whether God, if He's not the source of the evil that is in this world, could He then be the source of the death that comes from that evil? God bless you all.